The HOA president drove her shiny SUV straight onto my son's grave in the middle of his burial. The tires crushed the fresh dirt. The crowd froze, and when she finally opened her mouth, her excuse cut through the silence like a blade. "Wrap it up," she said coldly. "This gathering isn't permitted, little." Did she know that a judge would later hand her 10 years? Behind bars for what she called a compliance check. But let me take you back to where it all began. The hearse had just stopped. The air was heavy, thick with grief and the low hum of whispered prayers. That's when it happened. A pearl-colored SUV jumped the curb. Its hazard lights blinked like warning signs of shame. "Move," I said quietly at first, then louder, but she didn't. The tire rolled forward, pressing against the edge of the grave, cracking the wooden brace beneath the soil. My name is Hank Farididan, and that woman, Karen Truman, had just parked on my boy's resting place. The sky hung low, a dull gray blanket pressing over us. Father Michael murmured the final words of blessing. Amy, my wife, crushed my hand so tightly I could feel her nails bite through the skin, but it kept me upright. We were burying our son, our 10-year-old, bright, funny, endlessly curious boy, Leo. The world had shrunk to this small square of 2 green grass, and every breath hurt. I'm a cabinet maker by trade. I fix broken things for a living, but standing there I realized this I couldn't fix. Not the coffin, not the hole, not him. Then came the sound that shattered whatever peace we had left. It wasn't a sob, or thunder, or the rustle of wind through the trees. It was an engine, a loud, arrogant growl that didn't belong anywhere near the dead. Heads turned. I saw confusion ripple through the crowd. First curiosity, then disbelief, and finally horror. Amy's grip tightened again, her knuckles white. I looked up and saw that SUV barreling toward us, cutting through the gravel path like it owned the place. For a split second I thought maybe it was a mistake, maybe a worker, lost or confused. But the way it kept coming, steady and deliberate, told me this wasn't an accident. The vehicle came to a stop with a soft mechanical sigh. Its front tire rested right on the corner of Leo's grave, like it was claiming the ground as its own. I heard gasps, choked sobs, a rustle of feet. The priest stopped mid-prayer, his open book trembling in his hands. And then the driver's door opened. Out stepped Karen Truman, the HOA president, our self-declared ruler of White County. She was dressed in a crisp beige pantsuit, like she'd come straight from a board meeting to remind everyone who was boss. Her blonde hair was sprayed stiff, and her expression was pure smug authority. She didn't look at us. Not at me, not at the coffin. Her eyes drifted across the flowers and mourners like she was inspecting an untidy front lawn. She pointed a manicured finger at Father Michael. "Excuse me," she said, her voice loud and cutting. "This service needs to be wrapped up. It's unpermitted and violates community aesthetic standards." The priest blinked, clearly shaken. "Ma'am," he said softly, "this is a burial, a child's funeral." Karen waved her hand dismissively, her bracelets jingling. "Yes, I understand, Father, but the bylaws are very clear. No large assemblies without prior HOA approval. And these decorations," she gestured at the flowers, "they're excessive, visually disruptive." Something inside me snapped. The rage started deep in my chest and spread like fire. My vision blurred, my heartbeat roared in my ears. But I couldn't move. I was frozen between grief and fury, unable to do anything but stare. Amy, on the other hand, moved with calm precision. She pulled out her phone, her face stone still, and started recording. She didn't miss a second. Karen stepped closer, holding up a laminated card on a lanyard. "I am the president of the White County Homeowners Association," she declared. "This is an official compliance inspection. You have 5 minutes to disperse before I issue citations." Then, unbelievably, she shushed the priest. A sharp shh escaped her lips as she pressed her finger to them, toward a man who was trying to bless our son's soul. The crowd shifted. The sorrow turned to anger. My brother-in-law, usually the gentlest soul alive, stepped forward, fists balled. I caught his arm. "Not here," I whispered. This wasn't the time. Karen, blind to the storm she'd created, turned back to her SUV and clicked her key fob. The hazard lights blinked again. Blink, 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 casting an orange glow over the cracked dirt of my boy's grave. It was obscene. She stood there like she'd won something. In that instant, I realized the peace I'd been searching for since Leo's death was gone. What replaced it was a cold, burning resolve. I couldn't bring my son back, but I could make sure this woman paid. Amy was already on the phone with the police. Her voice didn't shake. "A woman has driven onto a burial plot during a funeral. She's refusing to move her car." When the officers arrived, Karen puffed herself up like she'd summoned them. She greeted them with a smile so fake it almost shone. "Officers, Thank you for responding so quickly. I'm Karen Truman, HOA president. This is a compliance matter. These people are holding an unapproved assembly, and I've asked them to leave. They're refusing. She handed them a binder full of highlighted bylaws, her ridiculous fake badge still swinging from her neck. Officer Miller glanced at the paper, unreadable. His partner, Sanchez, looked past her and saw what was really there: a coffin, a priest, and a family barely holding together. He exhaled slowly. "Ma'am, this cemetery isn't under your HOA," he said firmly. "You're trespassing and you can't park on a grave," Karen laughed. "You clearly don't understand the authority of the White County Covenant," she said, confidence dripping from every word. "This area is within the community boundary. I have the right to enforce standards." Amy stepped forward, calm but cold. "Officers," she said, holding out her phone. "She did more than park here." She played the video. The sound of the engine, the gasps, the priest's halted prayer, all of it. The officers' faces hardened. "Ma'am," Officer Sanchez said, "you need to move your car. Now." Karen crossed her arms. "I will not. I'm acting in my official capacity. I will move when this area is cleared." That's when I finally spoke. My throat felt raw. "She cracked it," I said quietly. Both officers turned. "Cracked what?" Miller asked. I pointed to the grave. "The brace. The vault." Miller crouched down, flashlight in hand. He stayed there for a long, terrible moment before standing up, face grim. He removed his hat, ran a hand through his hair, and looked at Karen. All professionalism vanished. His tone was steel. "Ma'am," he said evenly, "that brace is part of the burial vault. That's structural damage. In a cemetery, that's desecration. That's a felony." Karen's face drained of color. "That's absurd!" "It was already like that. Poor workmanship," she stammered. But the officer had already reached for his cuffs. "You were told this was a burial. You were asked to leave. You refused. And you caused damage to the plot," Miller said, voice like a hammer hitting stone. "Karen Truman, you are under arrest." The sound of the handcuffs clicking shut was the loudest thing I had ever heard. Quick note for viewers: any judge you see by the grave is a reenactment image. The real sentence happens later in court on the record. It echoed across the silent cemetery, a sharp metallic punctuation mark at the end of a nightmare sentence. Karen's face went from panicked to utterly aghast. "You can't do this," she shrieked, her voice cracking. "I am the HOA president. I have rights. I will have your jobs." The officers ignored her protests, leading her to their patrol car. The citation she was so eager to pursue had turned into a pair of shiny steel bracelets. The hazard lights on her pearl-white SUV continued to blink, 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 casting their stupid, mocking light on the scene of her downfall. They became proof, blinking evidence. Watching her go in the car was my first full breath all day. After the arrest, a surreal sort of calm descended. The tow truck came for Karen's SUV, hauling it off the grass with a quiet competence that felt like a blessing. The cemetery staff, deeply apologetic, inspected the vault. The crack in the support brace was real, a jagged line in the concrete that mirrored the fracture in our day. They assured us they would replace the entire vault lining before we proceeded. We finished the service. Our small group huddled together, the shock and anger now a simmering undercurrent to our grief. We went home, not to the quiet morning we had expected, but to the start of a war. The initial charges included trespassing and property damage with grave desecration under review pending the vault report and videos. She was out on bail before we'd even finished the sad little sandwiches my sister had brought over. And then the notices started. It began 2 days after the funeral. The first one was a thin, crisp envelope tucked into the handle of our front door, bearing the official seal of the White County Homeowners Association. I opened it expecting an apology, or at least some kind of official communication about the incident. Instead, it was a formal citation. "The violation yard melancholy." I read it twice, thinking it had to be a typo. But there it was in black and white. The overall aesthetic of the front lawn and entryway landscaping reflects a state of melancholy which is out of compliance with the community's standard of cheerful and vibrant presentation. A fine of $50 will be assessed if the emotional state of the landscaping is not rectified within 7 days. I just stared at it. Yard melancholy. Was I supposed to tell my petunias to cheer up? Should I put a little smiley face sticker on my oak tree? It was so absurd, so profoundly petty. It was almost funny. Almost. Amy wasn't laughing. She took the notice from my hand, her eyes scanning the text with a terrifying focus. "She's escalating," she said, her voice flat. "This isn't just petty. This is harassment. It's retaliation." She went to her laptop and started a new folder on the desktop. She named it Karen. She scanned the notice and saved it as Exhibit A. The next day, there was another one. This time it was for an unapproved grief hue on the black wreath we had hung on our door. Apparently, our mourning was not in one of the 3 pre-approved HOA colors for door adornments. Exhibit B. The day after that, we got a notice with a diagram. It was a satellite map of our driveway with angry red circles drawn on it. The citation was for improper vehicular placement. My truck, which I'd parked in the exact same spot for the last 15 years, was apparently now too close to the left boundary line. The notice included a helpful, condescending chart showing the correct and incorrect ways to park in one's own driveway. Exhibit C. Each notice was a little paper cut, a tiny sting designed to remind us that Karen was still out there, still in charge and still angry. They came for everything. The placement of our garbage cans on trash day, non-uniform lid orientation, the height of the grass in a single patch near the mailbox, inconsistent blade length. Event the flag we fly on the front porch, the same one my dad was given when he retired from the fire department, was cited for excessive wind-induced undulation. It was a campaign of 1,000 cuts designed to wear us down, to make us feel powerless, but it was having the opposite effect. With every ridiculous citation, a cold, hard resolve was setting in. I'd spent my life building things, working with my hands, following plans, and respecting precision. I appreciate a good system, and I recognized what Karen was doing. She was using a system, the HOA rules, as a weapon, and I decided I was going to use a system to fight back. I bought a 3-ring binder and a set of plastic sheet protectors. Every time a notice appeared, I would walk out, take a photo of it where I found it, and then carefully place it in the binder. I logged dates, bylaw numbers, fines, saved letters, emails, property records, everything. My grief was still a heavy cloak, but now it had a purpose. It was fuel. This binder, this growing collection of her pettiness became my project. It was something to build, a case instead of a cabinet. Our neighbors started to notice. Buddy Eli, who lived 2 doors down, got a citation for aggressively cheerful lawn gnomes, which he found hilarious until the fine doubled. Another neighbor, a sweet old woman named Mrs. Gable, was cited because the wind chimes her late husband had given her were producing unharmonious tones. Karen was carpet-bombing the entire neighborhood with violations, trying to isolate us, to make everyone else too afraid of their own fines to support us. But that's not how it works in a real community. You don't scare people into compliance, you just make them angry. And every time I slid another one of Karen's stupid vindictive notices into its plastic sleeve, I felt a little less like a victim and a little more like a craftsman carefully sanding down the pieces, getting them ready for the final assembly. The receipts were piling up, and I had a feeling the bill was going to be a big one. The turning point came as it often does, not with a loud bang, but with a quiet click, the click of Amy's mouse. While I was meticulously cataloging Karen's paper-based assault, Amy was waging a digital war. She's not just techie, she's a bloodhound with a keyboard. If there's a digital breadcrumb, she will find it, follow it, and find the baker who dropped it. Her focus was on the 2 things that had bothered her from the very beginning of this nightmare. The official-looking compliance badge Karen had flashed at the funeral and the chief of orders she'd presented to the police officers. They just didn't feel right to her. They felt cheap, homemade. She started with the badge. During the confrontation, Amy had managed to get a clear, high-resolution shot of Karen holding it up. It was blurry around the edges, but the central image, a generic-looking eagle, and the words, White County Compliance Officer, was mostly legible. Amy spent an evening working on that single photo. She used software I couldn't begin to understand, sharpening the image, adjusting the contrast, zooming in on the pixelated text. Sharon the image through a reverse image search, and for hours, she got nothing but pictures of other eagles, government seals, and stock photos. I brought her a cup of tea, and she was just staring at the screen, her brow furrowed in concentration. "It's too perfect," she murmured. "The font is too clean. It looks like a template." That was Thiki. She changed her search terms from official compliance badge to customizable security badge template. The first result was a website called officiallookingBadgesforFun.com, and there it was. The third template down, the authoritative eagle design. Price, $9.99 for the digital download, another $50 for the plastic lanyard and holder. You could type any words you wanted into the title and department fields. Amy clicked on the customer reviews section. A 5-star review from a guarantee in White County popped up. Perfect for adding a little extra authority when dealing with difficult residents. Looks so real, it read. Amy just leaned back in her chair and let out a long, slow breath. She printed out the web page, the template, and the customer review. "Exhibit D," she said, her voice a low, dangerous hum. She slid the papers across the table to me. I looked at the screen at the goofy-looking eagle that had been used to justify parking on my son's grave. $9.99. That's what her authority was worth. Next, she went after the orders. She had taken a photo of the document Karen showed the cops, the one with all the highlighted bylaws. Amy zoomed in on the official-looking seal at the top. It was the same clip art eagle from the badge. She then focused on the text itself. "This looks like Times New Roman," she said. "Standard, but look at the W in white and the T in Truman. See that little bit of bleed at the edge?" I squinted at the screen. I couldn't see a thing, but I knew better than to doubt her. "It's from an inkjet printer," she explained. "A good one, but not a professional press. Official municipal or legal documents are almost always printed on laser printers or professional presses. They don't bleed ink like this." She wasn't done. She downloaded the official HOA bylaws from the county website. She opened the PDF and placed it side by side with the photo of Karen's document. "Look," she said, pointing to a section number. "The font is different. The kerning, the spacing between the letters is off." Karen didn't just highlight the bylaws. She retyped them. She created a whole new document and stuck a fake seal on it to make it look more intimidating. She printed out the comparison, drawing neat red circles around the discrepancies. Logged it as Exhibit E. The final piece of the puzzle came when she cross-referenced the date on Karen's document with the metadata from the photo. The document was dated a week before the funeral, but the ink, according to Amy's analysis of the saturation and bleed pattern in the high-res photo, couldn't have been more than a few hours old when the picture was taken. "She printed it that morning," Amy said, her voice full of a cold, clear certainty. "She knew she was coming to the funeral to confront us. She prepared her fake documents in advance. The printer ink was still warm when she had arrived to torment a grieving family. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment act of a power-hungry woman having a bad day. This was premeditated. It was planned. It was a calculated act of cruelty." Amy compiled everything into a neat digital file. The badge website, the customer review, the font analysis, the side-by-side comparison of the documents. She emailed a password-protected copy to our lawyer and a backup to her own private cloud storage. Our attorney, Patel, shark in a navy suit, wrote back, "Save everything. We'll use every receipt." Then she looked at me, her eyes flashing. "She's not just a bully, Hank," she said. "She's a fraud, and we have the proof." The binder of petty notices felt like child's play now, and we had the ammunition we needed. A week after Amy's digital bombshell, things got quiet. Too quiet. The daily notices stopped. We didn't see Karen's pearl-white SUV patrolling the neighborhood like a land shark. For a moment, I allowed myself to hope that maybe, just maybe, she had realized she'd gone too far. Maybe her lawyer had advised her to back off while the initial charges were pending. It was a foolish hope. Bullies don't back down. They just regroup and find a new angle of attack. The tip came from Buddy Eli. He called me late one night, his voice a conspiratorial whisper. "Hank, you're not going to believe this," he said. "I was walking my dog down by the cemetery fence. You know, the back road. Saw Karen's car parked there. And she wasn't alone. Had two guys with her. They were carrying a tote." A cold dread washed over me. "A tote? What kind of tote?" I asked. "A big plastic one," Buddy Elisade. "Looked heavy. They slipped through that gap in the fence, headed into the memorial park." I thanked him and hung up. I looked at Amy. She had heard my side of the conversation, and she was already on her feet, her expression grim. "She's going back," she said. It wasn't a question. "She's not just going back," I replied, the bitter realization dawning on me. "She's going to do something to the grave. We had to have proof. Calling the cops again would just be our word against hers. They'd show up, she'd claim she was just paying her respects, and we'd look like the crazy harassing ones. We needed to see what was in that tote." Amy grabbed her keys, not for the car, for the drone. It was her hobby, her expensive toy. A high-end quadcopter with a 4K night vision camera and a nearly silent motor. I had always teased her about it, calling it her spy machine. I never thought we'd actually use it to spy on someone. We drove to the edge of the neighborhood, parking a few blocks away from the cemetery's back road. We walked in the shadows to a bushy overlook with a clear line to Leo's section. Amy set up the controller, its small screen glowing in the dark with a soft. The drone lifted off the ground, a silent dark insect ascending into the night sky. Amy was a master pilot. She guided the drone over the trees, the camera feed on her controller, showing a ghostly green and black world. It took her less than a minute to find them. The night vision camera cut through the darkness, rendering the scene in stark, eerie detail. There was Karen standing by Leo's grave, and with her were two large hulking men I recognized from the HOA board meetings, her loyal enforcers, a couple of guys who clearly enjoyed the little bit of power she gave them. And between them on the ground was the plastic tote. As we watched, one of the men opened it. He pulled out a stack of what looked like large, brightly colored stickers. Karen took one. Even in the grainy night vision, We could see the big, bold letters, violation. My blood ran cold. She was going to tag my son's grave, like it was an abandoned car or a building slated for demolition. She was planning to slap a bright orange violation sticker on his headstone. She pointed, directing her two goons. They moved to the graves on either side of Leo's. One of them peeled the back off a sticker and leaned down, pressing it onto the polished granite of a neighboring headstone. The drone's camera was so good we could almost read the name. They were tagging other graves too. It wasn't just about us. It was about making a statement about marking her territory. Even here, it was the most depraved act of petty tyranny I could possibly imagine. Amy didn't make a sound. Her fingers moved deftly over the controls. A surgeon at work. She swung the drone around, swooping lower. The motors were so quiet they were probably mistaken for the wind. She zoomed in, getting a crystal-clear shot of Karen's face, her expression a tight, vicious smirk. She panned down, capturing the brand name on the tote. Then she moved the drone again, positioning it perfectly. She got a long, lingering shot of the first goon's face as he tagged a second grave. Then she swung it around to the other side, getting an equally clear shot of the second goon. Finally, she flew the drone back out, up and over the fence, and brought it directly over Karen's parked SUV. The camera was pointed straight down. The license plate was as clear as day on the little screen. Amy deadpan smile for the drone, Karen. It shoots in 4K and holds grudges. She had it all. The faces, the act, the proof of conspiracy, the license plate, clean evidence in 4K. She landed the drone as silently as it had taken off. She didn't say a word, just packed it up, her movements precise and efficient. We walked back to the car in silence. The rage I felt was so immense it felt like it had no sound. It was a pressure inside my chest, a quiet, contained explosion. We had her on video and up close. The game had changed. This wasn't about bylaws and violations anymore. This was about desecration. And we had a front row seat recorded in glorious 4K. The drone footage was a nuke, and we had to decide exactly when and how to detonate it. Amy saved the video file in multiple locations under layers of password protection. We sent a copy to our lawyer with a simple message. She did it again. We have video. We also logged 10 witness statements from neighbors who saw the stunt at the funeral. The funeral home sent dashcam and permit copies too. Clean paper trail. His reply was almost instantaneous. Do not release this. Do not post it. Do not show it to anyone. We go to the DA with this first thing in the morning. But we had a more immediate problem. Karen and her goons had only tagged a few graves before they seemed to get spooked, packing up their TODA violation stickers and leaving. We knew they'd be back. They hadn't finished their sick project. We couldn't let them. I made a phone call. It was to a man named Marcus, an old friend I'd served with years ago. Marcus was the president of the local Veterans of Foreign Wars post. And he was also a member of a motorcycle club. The kind of guys who look intimidating, but spend their weekends doing charity rides for sick kids. They were good men, solid men. I told him the whole story from the SUV on the grave to the drone footage of the stickers. I didn't ask him for anything specific. I just told him what was happening. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then Marcus said in his low, growly voice, "What time do you think she'll be back?" I told him probably the same time around midnight. "We'll be there," he said and hung up. The next night, Amy and I went back to the cemetery, but we didn't hide. We walked right through the front gate and went to Leo's grave. We brought a couple of folding chairs and a thermos of coffee. We were just going to sit. We were going to wait. We weren't going to let her touch his resting place again. Around 11:30, we heard it. A low, distant rumble. It grew louder and louder. A rolling thunder that seemed to come from all directions at once. Then the headlights appeared. Dozens of them. A long, slow procession of motorcycles, their engines rumbling in a low, respectful cadence. They pulled up along the road outside the cemetery fence, parking in a neat, orderly line. The riders dismounted. There were maybe 30 of them. They were big men clad in leather vests adorned with patches, American flags, Puemia symbols, eagles. They were veterans, bikers, men who understood service and respect. Marcus walked over to us and clapped me on the shoulder. He nodded to Amy. "We're just here to pay our respects, Hank," he said. He didn't need to say anything more. His men filed silently through the cemetery gate. They didn't talk. They didn't shout. They simply formed a line, a human wall, standing shoulder to shoulder. One vet spoke calm and low. "Ma'am, step back from the names." They created a peaceful, impassable perimeter around the section where Leo was buried. They stood with their arms crossed, their faces grim and resolute, silent sentinels in the moonlight. It was one of the most powerful things I have ever witnessed. It was a quiet, firm, undeniable statement. "You will not pass." Right on schedule, just after midnight, Karen's pearl-white SUV came creeping down the back road. It stopped when the headlights illuminated the line of motorcycles. We could see her silhouette behind the wheel, peering out, confused. The car door opened and she got out, flanked by her two goons. They were carrying the plastic tote again. They walked toward the gap in the fence, their steps confident at first, then faltering as they saw the silent wall of men waiting for them. Karen stopped dead in her tracks. Her two goons froze behind her. They stared at the line of veterans who stared back, their expressions unmoving. No one said a word. The only sound was the chirping of crickets and the faint hum of a distant highway. Karen's face went through a whole range of emotions. Confusion, then annoyance, then anger, and finally a flicker of fear. She was used to people who would argue with her, people she could shout down and intimidate with her fake authority and her binder of rules. She had no idea what to do with this. She couldn't cite them for a violation. They weren't breaking any rules. They were just standing there quietly, firmly. She took a half step forward as if to challenge them, then thought better of it. Her mouth opened, then shut. The tote hit the ground. Nobody blinked. One of her goons, the one holding the tote, looked at the line of bikers, then at Karen, and he slowly, deliberately placed the tote on the ground. He took a step back from it as if washing his hands of the whole affair. The standoff lasted for what felt like an hour, but was probably only a minute. It was a silent battle of wills, and Karen was completely outmatched. Finally, with a huff of pure frustration, she spun on her heel, marched back to her SUV, and got in. Her two helpers scrambled after her. The car door slammed, and the SUV sped away, kicking up a cloud of dust. The bikers didn't move. They waited until the taillights had completely disappeared. Then, as one, they turned, walked back to their bikes, and rumbled off into the night. Their job done. The tote full of violation stickers was left sitting on the ground, right where the goon had dropped it. Amy and I walked over and looked inside. It was full of them. Hundreds of ugly orange declarations of hate. We closed the lid, left it there, and went home. The wall had held. We called the cemetery manager and the non-emergency line. By dawn, officers bagged the tote and logged it into evidence. The morning after the bikers stood their silent guard, our lawyer met with the district attorney's office. He presented the drone footage. According to him, the mood in the room went from standard legal review to holy cow. In the 30 seconds it took to watch Karen's goons slap the first sticker on a headstone, the DA's office immediately opened a major investigation. But they wanted more. They wanted to establish a pattern of harassment, of abuse of power. They had the nuke, but they wanted to show the fallout. We need to go public, our lawyer told us. We need the other victims to come forward. Was hesitant. The last thing I wanted was to turn our family's tragedy into a media circus. But Amy, as always, saw the bigger picture. It's not just about us anymore, Hank, she said. It's about everyone she's bullied. It's about property values versus human decency. We have to do it. The perfect opportunity fell right into our laps. Karen, reeling from her defeat at the cemetery, called an emergency community meeting to address recent security concerns and unauthorized gatherings. It was a classic power move, an attempt to seize back control of the narrative. The meeting was to be held on the community center lawn. That's when Buddy Eli had his stroke of genius. Let's throw a counterparty, he said, a mischievous twinkle in his eye. A Whitehurst community storytelling festival right across the street on my lawn. Buddy Eli was a retired local news cameraman with a wicked sense of humor and a deep love for public access television. He proposed we set up a camera and livestream the whole thing. The day of the meeting was bright and sunny. Karen had a podium and a sound system set up on the perfectly manicured lawn of the community center. Across the street, Buddy set a table, a webcam, and a big sign. Got an HOA story? Tell it here live. He opened like a sports seer, and it looks like the reigning champion of citations. Karen the bylaw brawler Truman is taking the field. She looks confident, folks. But does she have what it takes to go the distance against a tidal wave of public opinion? Let's find out. At first, people were hesitant. But then Mrs. Gable, the sweet old lady with the wind chimes, walked up to Buddy Eli's table. She held up the notice she had received, her hand trembling slightly. In a soft, clear voice, she told the story of her late husband, how he'd hung those chimes for her on their last anniversary together, and how the HOA had called their sound unharmonious. As she spoke, something incredible happened. The small crowd that had gathered for Karen's meeting started to drift across the street. They were drawn in by Mrs. Gable's quiet dignity. After she finished, a man came forward to talk about the fine he got for his son's basketball hoop. Then a young couple talked about the citation they received for having a politically divisive welcome mat. It was like a dam breaking. One by one, our neighbors lined up at Buddy Eli's table, each one holding a ridiculous notice, a piece of paper that represented a moment of frustration and powerlessness. They held them up to the camera like trophies of absurdity. "Yard melancholy," one man shouted, waving his citation to cheers from the growing crowd. "Improper vehicular placement," another yelled, holding up the parking diagram. People were laughing, sharing their stories, united in their collective disbelief. The chat on the livestream was exploding. People from neighboring communities were chiming in with their own HOA horror stories. Amy was standing next to Buddy Eli, feeding him names and facts, occasionally holding her phone up to the camera to show a picture of one of our notices. Across the street, Karen's meeting was falling apart. She was trying to talk about maintaining standards, but no one was listening. Her audience had abandoned her. They were all watching the live stream on their phones, cheering for their neighbors. The sight of dozens of her residents standing in line to publicly air their grievances against her made her face turn a shade of red I'd never seen before. She started shouting into her microphone, but her voice was drowned out by the laughter and applause from Buddy Eli's lawn. The climax came when Amy's phone rang. She answered it, listened for a moment, and then her eyes went wide. She held the phone up to the live stream microphone. "Hello," she said. "Yes, this is Amy Freriden." A voice clear and professional came through the speaker. "Mrs. Freriden, this is Assistant District Attorney Markham. We've been watching your live stream. We have a few more questions for you. Can you and your husband come down to our office tomorrow morning?" Buddy killed the stream right after. We handed the raw files to the DA, time-stamped, unedited. The crowd went absolutely silent for a second and then erupted into the loudest cheer of the day. Buddy Eli did a victory dance, pumping his fists in the air like a prize fighter. "And there you have it, folks," he yelled into the camera. "The DA's office is on the line. It seems the prosecution is getting ready to play hardball." "What a turn of events," the DA had called back. "Live on the air. We were witnesses, and our stack of receipts, once a private collection of petty injustices, had just become the foundation for a very public, very serious criminal case." The viral live stream and the DA's on-air phone call sent shockwaves through the White County HOA. Karen was forced to call another emergency meeting, this time in the community center's stuffy, windowless auditorium. The stated purpose was to clarify recent events and quell baseless rumors. The real purpose, we all knew, was for her to try and save her own skin. The room was packed. Every seat was taken, and people were standing along the walls. The fire marshal was probably having a heart attack somewhere, but nobody was leaving. The energy in the room was electric, a mix of anger, anticipation, and a healthy dose of Shad and Freya. Buddy Eli was there, of course, with his camera setting up in the back to livestream the whole meltdown. Karen sat at a long table at the front of the room, flanked by the other 4 members of the HOA board. Her 2 goons from the cemetery, whose names we now knew were Barry and Glenn, sat on her immediate right and left. They both looked pale and sweaty under the fluorescent lights. The other 2 board members, a mousy-looking woman named Carol and an older gentleman named Arthur, sat at the far ends of the table looking like they'd rather be anywhere else on earth. Karen banged a comical-looking gavel on the table. "This meeting will come to order," she announced, her voice strained. She launched into a prepared speech full of buzzwords like community integrity, procedural misunderstandings, and malicious misrepresentation. She tried to paint herself as the victim, a dedicated public servant being attacked by a few rogue elements who didn't respect the rules. Nobody was buying it. People were shouting questions from the audience. "What about the fake badge, Karen? Tell us about the stickers. Did you really find Mrs. Gable for her wind chimes?" Karen ignored them, her face a tight mask of denial. "We will now review the official documents pertaining to the incident at the cemetery," she said, trying to regain control. An aide fumbled with a projector, and an image of the official order she had shown the police flickered onto the large screen behind her. It was the document Amy had proven was a forgery, the one with the clip art eagle seal. Karen started to read from it, her voice droning on about bylaws and compliance. That's when Amy stood up. She didn't shout. She just stood there holding her phone. "That seal is a fake," she said, her voice clear and carrying across the silent room. "You bought the template for the badge and the seal from a novelty website for $9.99. I have the receipt." A low murmur went through the crowd. Karen's face flushed. "That is an outrageous and slanderous accusation," she sputtered. Amy just smiled a thin, cold smile. She texted a file to Buddy Eli. A second later, the image on the screen behind Karen changed. The fake order was gone, replaced by a side-by-side comparison. On the left was Karen's document. On the right was a screenshot from official-looking badges for fun.com showing the authoritative eagle seal. They were identical. The room erupted, but the real drama was happening at the head table. Barry and Glenn, the 2 cemetery goons, were staring at the screen. Their jaws were slack. It was clear from the looks on their faces that they had no idea the documents were fraudulent. They had believed Karen. They had followed her orders, thinking they were backed by some kind of real authority. They looked at the fake seal on the screen. Then they looked at Karen, whose face had crumpled into a mask of pure panic. Then they looked at each other. A silent conversation passed between them. It was the universal look of two guys realizing they have been played for fools and are about to go down with a sinking ship. Without a word, Barry pushed his chair back. It scraped loudly against the floor. He stood up. Glenn did the same. They didn't look at the audience. They didn't even look at Karen. They just looked at the exit door. Then they bolted. They walked fast and determined right off the stage, down the center aisle, and out the back of the auditorium. They resigned from the board with their feet. The crowd watched, stunned into silence, as 2/5 of the HOA leadership just walked out of the meeting, and presumably, out of Karen's life. Now it was just Karen, Carol, and Arthur at the long table. Carol, the mousy woman, looked at the empty chairs, then at Karen's horrified face. She started to tremble. She picked up her water glass, took a shaky sip, and then pushed her own chair back. I resign, she whispered into the microphone, and then she scurried off the stage after Barry and Glenn. Now it was just Karen and old Arthur. The crowd was going wild. Buddy Eli was giving a frantic play-by-play into his camera. And they're dropping like flies, folks. The board is in full-blown mutiny. It's a leadership apocalypse here at the Whitehurst Community Center. Karen just sat there frozen as her tiny kingdom dissolved around her on live television. The fake seal, the symbol of her manufactured power, was still glowing on the screen behind her, a monument to her own spectacular undoing. By morning, Barry and Glenn had contacted the DA to cooperate. They handed over texts and tote receipts. One receipt showed sticker rolls bought the afternoon of the funeral. The collapse of the HOA board was just the appetizer. The main course was the criminal trial. Thanks to the mountain of evidence Amy and I had compiled, the viral live stream that brought dozens of other victims forward, and the drone footage that was the nail in the coffin, the DA's office didn't just throw the book at Karen Truman. They threw the entire library. The courtroom was packed for every hearing. It became the biggest show in Whitehurst County. Our little neighborhood drama had gone prime time. I sat next to Amy every day watching the legal process grind forward. It was slow, methodical, and deeply satisfying. The prosecution, led by ADA Markham, built their case like I would build a piece of fine furniture. Carefully, precisely, with no gaps or weak joints. He stacked the charges one on top of the other, each one locking the next into place. First, grave desecration. They played the police body cam footage from the funeral showing the tire on the grave and the officer discovering the cracked vault brace. The jury winced, then came pretending to be a government officer. They put the owner of official-looking badges for Fund.com on the stand via video call. He cheerfully confirmed that Karen T. from Whitehurst County had purchased the authoritative Eagle package and left a glowing review. Thedgery chuckled. Next up, evidence tampering and fabricating evidence. The prosecution put a document expert on the stand, who explained in excruciating detail how the ink bleed and font kerning on Karen's official orders proved they were forgeries created on a home inkjet printer. Amy took the stand and calmly explained her digital investigation, walking the jury through the screenshots and comparisons. She was a phenomenal witness, calm, factual, and unshakable. When Karen's lawyer tried to paint her as a hysterical, grieving mother looking for someone to blame, Amy just looked at him and said, "I am a grieving mother, but my grief doesn't affect my ability to tell the difference between a PDF and a poorly made forgery." The lawyer had no more questions. The most damning evidence, of course, was the drone footage. When Ada Markham played for the court, a hush fell over the room. The ghostly green and black video played out on the large screens showing Karen and her two now former cronies. Barry and Glenn, who had both flipped and were testifying for the prosecution in exchange for lesser charges. The jury watched, mesmerized and horrified, as the men slapped the bright orange violation stickers onto the headstones in the dead of night. They saw the smug look on Karen's face, illuminated by the drone's night vision. There was no explaining it away. There was no spinning it. It was pure premeditated malice captured in 4K resolution. Finally, it was Karen's turn. Her defense was, in a word, pathetic. She took the stand and tried to portray herself as a pillar of the community. A lone warrior fighting against the forces of chaos and declining property values. Her lawyer asked her why she did it, why she went to such lengths. Karen looked at Thedgery, her face a mask of self-righteous indignation, and delivered the line that would seal her fate. "I did it for the community," she said, her voice quivering with phony emotion. "I have dedicated my life to maintaining the standards of Whitehurst County. We have to protect our property values. A messy, unregulated cemetery brings down the aesthetic of the entire neighborhood. I was simply trying to enforce the rules that everyone agreed to. Property values. She desecrated my son's grave, terrorized my family, and bullied an entire neighborhood. And her defense was property values. The prosecutor didn't even have to say anything on his cross-examination. He just let her words hang in the air, thick and poisonous. The jury was out for less than an hour. The verdict was guilty on all counts. The sentencing hearing was a week later. Karen stood before the judge, a stern, no-nonsense woman named Judge Benton, and read a prepared statement full of non-apologies about misunderstandings and overzealousness. The judge listened patiently, her face impassive. When Karen was finished, the judge looked down at her from the bench. "Miss Truman," she said, her voice like ice, "you were not protecting property values. You were committing crimes. You used a position of minor authority to terrorize a grieving family and to desecrate a sacred space. You have shown no remorse, only an arrogant belief that the rules do not apply to you." She picked up her gavel. "This court finds that your actions were not just illegal, they were morally bankrupt." The judge looked at Karen, then at Amy and me. "In this courtroom, human decency is valued far more than property values." The gavel ended with a loud, sharp crack that echoed through the silent room. "I hereby sentence you to 10 years, 5 to serve, 5 suspended with strict probation, counseling, restitution, and a lifetime HOA ban." The room froze. 10 years. Karen went white. The gavel echo lingered. The 10-year prison sentence was the end of the criminal case. But it wasn't the end of the story. While Karen Truman was trading her beige pantsuits for a drab prison jumpsuit, our lawyer was busy filing a civil suit. We sued Karen directly, and we sued the Whitehurst County Homeowners Association as an entity. Our case was simple. The HOA, through its negligence and its failure to supervise its president, had created an environment where her harassment and criminal activity could flourish. They were liable for the emotional distress, the harassment, and the desecration of our son's grave. With the criminal conviction as a foundation, the civil case was a slam dunk. The HOA's insurance company, facing a mountain of undeniable evidence and the potential for a massive punitive judgment from a jury, was eager to settle. We didn't want their money for ourselves. The idea of profiting from our son's death was sickening. But we saw an opportunity to create something good out of all this ugliness, to build something beautiful on the foundation of our pain. We worked with our lawyer to structure the settlement. The final agreement included a large, undisclosed sum, every penny of which was to be placed in a trust. The purpose of that trust to design, build, and perpetually maintain the Leo Freedom Memorial Garden for Children at the White County Memorial Park. It would be a special section of the cemetery, a peaceful, beautiful place for families who had lost a child. A place with flowers and gentle wind chimes, the harmonious kind, and maybe even a few tasteful, non-aggressive gnomes. The HOA board, now composed of shell-shocked residents who were desperate to put the whole scandal behind them, agreed to everything. They also issued a formal public apology to our family and to every resident who had been unjustly cited by Karen. The reign of terror was officially over. Months passed, the seasons turned, the construction of the memorial garden began. We watched as a barren patch of land was transformed. They planted cherries, laid winding paths, set a small fountain, a place of life inside loss. It was a testament not to our grief, but to our love for Leo and for all the other children who were gone too soon. The legal battles faded into the background, replaced by the quiet, hopeful work of creating this sanctuary. On the first anniversary of Leo's burial, Amy and I went to the cemetery. The new vault had been set long ago, and the grass over his grave had grown in thick and green. The headstone was clean and simple, bearing his name, his dates, and a small etched baseball, his favorite thing in the world. The memorial garden was nearly complete, its new trees already starting to bud. The air was no longer heavy and thick with grief. It was light, filled with the scent of fresh soil and the promise of spring. We brought red and white roses, his colors, our promise. We knelt together on the soft grass. Amy carefully arranged the roses in the small vase built into the headstone. I reached out and traced the letters of his name with my finger. We stayed there for a long time, not talking much, just being together. The quiet was back. It was a real quiet this time, a peaceful quiet, not the roaring silence of fresh grief. We wanted peace. We earned it the hard way through justice. As we stood to leave, I looked at the beautiful red and white roses standing out against the gray granite. They weren't on any HOA list. I set the last rose. Love is not a code violation. And in the quiet peace of that afternoon, I knew with a certainty that settled deep in my bones that we had finally,